Cisco Secure Workload, Incident Response, Vulnerability with CVE 2022-21850. So there's a system that was compromised due to an RDP client vulnerability. We need to identify all systems at risk for the CVE and restrict all access using RDP to all systems. So basically, we want to search and check to see whether or not we're exposed to the CVE, and then any asset that might be exposed or workload, we want to make sure that they can't connect from that asset to an RDP session that might take advantage of that vulnerability. So we've jumped to vulnerabilities here. This gives us a good list of all of our workloads and CVEs that are available. It gives us some scoring, remote exploitable, low complexity, high complexity. So it gives us a good idea of what's going on. We also see CVEs, packages, and workloads, and we've jumped into a specific workload itself, and you can start seeing the distribution based on CVSS version 2 or version 3. We're going to focus on a specific host, and we're going to check to see whether or not it's at risk. And once we finish that, we'll create an inventory filter and build a rule to apply to that workload itself. So we see vulnerabilities here, we see a list of them, but let's go to packages real quick, and we flag them here as well. So if you're looking for packages installed on a workload, you can certainly see whether or not some packages might be vulnerable. So very quickly, we can do a search here on the specific host and to determine whether or not there's some exposure here. And we'll go ahead and hit filter, and we can see that it is at risk, and it's a high severity rate. It's a network accessible, and we can pivot right to the details all the way up into getting the details right from Microsoft here. And so you can see here, it breaks it down. It says a vulnerable component is bound to a network stack and set of possible attackers, extends beyond the other options listed up to and including the entire internet. Such vulnerability is often termed remote exploitable. And then we go down here, we can see remote desktop connection. An attacker with control of a remote desktop server could trigger a remote code execution on the RDP client. So that's what we're going to try to mitigate here. We're going to make sure that you can't go outbound and connect to an RDP server from these workloads, and probably not great practice anyway. So let's go ahead and build out our inventory filter. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to search for that CVE. And it's going to pull every asset or every workload that might be exposed to this. And it's dynamic. So as new assets might come online and maybe they're not patched, they'll automatically get added to this inventory filter list, which in turn could be deployed on your workloads and automatically added, which is really neat. So let's go ahead and create this. We'll go ahead now and create another filter, and this filter is going to be specific to all hosts, internet and internal. We don't want this asset or workload connecting to any RDP session. Again, it's a workload. Maybe that's not best practice anyway. And second, any host that is offering RDP services that has the ability or potentially has the ability to exploit this vulnerability. So we'll look at address here, and we're going to look for 0.0.0.0/0. So that's all hosts. We'll go ahead and hit next. And you can see it's picked up a couple. We'll go ahead and add that. And now we've got this inventory filter. We've got two of them. Now we can use these in policy. So let's go ahead and jump to our primary workspace here. And let me just close this, and we'll go to absolute policies. This is going to enforce this rule regardless of what might be set in other areas like default policy. So basically what we're saying here is no matter what, if you are a workload that has been identified as CVE 2022-21850, that RDP, going to any host on port 3389, we want to deny that. And so we'll go ahead and create that rule. Now we have a default rule that allows, and then there's a catch-all that denies. But at the end of the day, all I have to do is push the button to make sure that this is enforced if I'm not already doing so. And I've now mitigated my risk here while I determine what's my next step in regards to patching.